Around the Horn has been a staple in the ESPN lineup for over 20 years, and its cancellation took a lot of people by surprise. But how did we get here? Why would ESPN cancel one of its last original programs? Let's take a closer look into the slow and silent decline of ESPN's Around the Horn. Starting in 2002, ESPN started a quasi-game show / sports panel talk show called Around the Horn, to lead into the other massive hit from a year earlier, Pardon the Interruption. And just like PTI, Around the Horn was another massive success for ESPN in terms of its original programming. The concept of the show was simple. 4 sports journalists from across the country would compete in a battle of opinions discussing the topics of the sports world on that given day. The host would then give out points to the panelists that made interesting and insightful answers on the topic. On the flip side, they could detract points and mute panelists if they got off topic or had a genuinely bad take. This ability to keep contributors in check in real time was kind of revolutionary, because you normally had to let them finish their terrible take, and it often derailed the conversation because you'd then have to address that terrible take.
He passes like Magic Johnson, and he can shoot from outside.
I'm not even talking to you about this no more. It's ignorant.
Okay.
I'm not even talking to you about it no more.
Stephen A., to your,
I'm not even talking to you about it no more.
The mute button created conflict and made the show more game showy. It was a game about talking about games. But with this tremendous power given to the hosts of the show, it was critical they find the right person to bear that responsibility and keep the show moving. The original host, Max Kellerman, hosted for over a year, where in this clip he sounds like he's doing a corny impression of future host Tony Reali.
4 things I know are true. You can't front on Kobe and the Lakers. You shouldn't sleep on Gary Payton and the Bucks. You need to respect the Yankees, gangster.
Would you please?
And I'm Max Kellerman. Let's go round the horn, son.
Remember, kids, you can't fake cool. Kellerman used the success of Around the Horn to secure a bigger contract outside of ESPN, as he left the show to take his god-awful takes to Fox Sports.
I want Iguodala.
Tony Reali, who was with Pardon the Interruption at the time, was tasked with the role of being the host of the young show, and with Tony, Around the Horn thrived. The 2000s was a very different time at ESPN. They were creating some of their best content of all time. The 30 for 30 documentaries, PTI, Around the Horn. This was peak Sports Center with a ton of beloved anchors. Even their commercials were perfect.
Hey Mom, I'm done with my segment!
Oh yeah, and they also broadcasted live sports as well. ESPN was a well-oiled machine during this decade, and the Around the Horn model fit perfectly in the 2000s TV media landscape. In fact, it was a little ahead of its time. Around the Horn was packed full of different topics, and they only had about 21 minutes to address all of those topics. And as a result, Around the Horn moved at a blistering pace. It was TikTok before TikTok. The panelists had roughly 20 seconds to formulate a short, concise response to make their point. There wasn't any time for fluff, and if there was, you got muted. Around the Horn relied on the talents of a lot of well-respected sports journalists. That's journalists, not personalities. And they were definitely journalists because, Jesus, these are not the faces meant for television. Woody here looks like a melting candle. These are faces made for radio and print media. But seriously, these are some of the most accomplished sports journalists in the country, and now they were getting their moment to showcase their skills and insight on ESPN on a daily basis. During the over 20-year run, it wasn't so much the show or the topics covered fans were drawn to. It was the personalities of the panelists themselves. Since the show was formatted like a game, you could root for your favorite panelists to win. Team Kalishaw till I die. And whether you loved Woody Page or hated Woody Page, you can't deny that he was unapologetically himself. I would consider Woody to be the originator of the hot take, but he didn't just give hot takes to go viral or clickbait like many others would do in the future. He did it because that's who he was. He was kind of like your drunk uncle. You also had some other OGs like the aforementioned Tim Kalishaw, Bill Plaschke, Kevin Blackistone, and Jay Mariotti. Jackie McMullen was a woman in a male-dominated space, but she wasn't constantly patting herself on the back because it was so hard to be a woman in sports media. She just talked sports like everybody else. And she wasn't there because she was a woman, she was there because she was an accomplished journalist and she knew her shit. J.A. Adande, Israel Gutierrez, Pablo Torre, Frank Cazzola, there are so many recognizable names because of this show. And it can't be overstated that this was a huge platform for these up-and-coming sports journalists to show off their talents on a national stage, and has led to so many people from the show getting jobs at ESPN and other outlets because they got that opportunity. See Mina Kimes becoming an analyst for NFL Live, in part because of Around the Horn. Now you have Emily Kaplan, Marcel Louis-Jacques, and Courtney Cronin, who have become the newcomers to the show in recent years, and would have kept the sports journalistic traditions alive and well for what would have been the show's foreseeable future. But none of the success of the show happens without Tony Reali. I can't think of a better media figure that could do the job Tony Reali has done over the last 20 years. He was the most natural, charismatic, slick-talking New Yorker that kept the show cruising like a Cadillac even at its breakneck speed. Tony never made himself the center of attention, and he understood the importance of the journalistic integrity that was the core of the show. Meanwhile, keeping it fun, playful, and entertaining for the viewers while allowing the panelists to be themselves. Tony is a master of controlled chaos, and I believe is the driving force behind why this show was so successful for so long. Around the Horn also had a way of reminding us that there are more important things to life than sports. There was a level of humanity to the show that no other sports talk show could come close to having. There were moments on that show that spoke to people on a level that sports will never be able to reach. Whether it was Woody talking about dealing with depression, Tim Kalashaw's sobriety, or Israel Gutierrez coming out as gay. And probably the most powerful moment in the entire show's history is when Tony addressed the loss of one of his twins during childbirth on Father's Day.
Israel Gutierrez, take the FaceTime.
Aha. I'm still feeling the Father's Day vibe, so I gladly cede my time to you, Mr. Tony Reali.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you, Israel. The notes and the condolences my wife Sammy and I have received have gone right into our soul, and I wanted to say that. Talking about the duality of losing a child near childbirth and delivering another healthy one is impossible. I was talking about this yesterday on Twitter. How can you ever be whole again? Parents have had to go through this before. I'm going through this now. And I spent time, pledging that it's okay not to be okay. And for me, the recognition that I've come to is that life can be out of our control. And that's okay. It's how we respond and what we do. That's what we have control of. So here's where I am today. Grief is part of humanity. Grief is proof of humanity. Parents dealing with loss or anybody dealing with loss, meet yourself where you are. Give voice to your feelings. Young men, young women watching, this can be how you grieve. Don't bury your heart. Keep it on the outside and look to other people because humanity can lift us. That has been my experience.
But yet, here we are now. Today was Around the Horn's final show. What happened? There are many reasons Around the Horn was canceled. None are bigger than simply the sports media landscape changed. And while it changed, Around the Horn, and more ESPN as a whole, didn't adapt with it. In the 2000s, ESPN had a near monopoly on sports content. On a typical day, you would get home from school or work, starting at 5 p.m., you were locked into Around the Horn, PTI, and an hour of a brand new sports center. And then if there was a live game after that, ESPN had you for 4 straight hours during primetime TV. But over time, other networks created their own sports content and secured the rights to broadcast live sports as well. ESPN slowly lost the grip on their monopoly. And whether it was hubris or incompetence, ESPN continued to keep things business as usual because they were still the worldwide leader in sports. Starting in 2010-ish, the internet began to explode onto the sports scene and ushered in the beginning of ESPN's slow slip into irrelevance. Twitter became the town square where you could see tweets from your favorite athletes and message them directly, and sometimes they would see it and respond back. Video clips could be shared, go viral, and be available on demand. You didn't need to wait and watch a rerun of a Sports Center to eventually see it. With this massive expansion of the internet and the unlimited access to sports content at your fingertips, people didn't need to be locked into their TV sets for hours on end just to get caught up on that day's sports news and highlights. The viewing habits of the average sports fan drastically changed, and it splintered into so many different directions. People began cutting the cord and consuming free media on their phones, only tuning into ESPN for live sporting events. The internet back then was the Wild West, and again, ESPN kind of ignored it. It didn't try and anticipate the next move, it just rode the wave. Now, we've talked about the impact the internet and social media had on sports media consumption, but we need to address on how it changed sports media figures. The internet now gave everybody a platform to talk about sports, like me. And people quickly found out that they could become famous if they said inflammatory shit. This would become known as the rise of the hot take.
Who's a more unstoppable? Forget about scoring.
He is the best ball handler in the world. I'm about to put Paul George in the. Oh, you don't like it? I'm starting to see. Yes, I'm starting to see. And a 6-game
Social media companies and their algorithms started prioritizing views, interactions, and watch time. This was done to keep people on their platforms for longer so they could sell more ads and make more money. So people started making that type of content. Having a hot take generally invokes a negative reaction, and negative reactions leads to engagement, which in turn gets the content pushed to more people by the algorithm. Whereas a well thought out and well written point on a subject would fall on deaf ears. Today, the highest peaks in sports media is almost completely occupied by these hot take merchants. They are generally not well liked, but they keep getting seen and continue to have the largest platforms to repeatedly spew their bullshit. While there is a million sports topics, according to the internet, the only one people want to talk about is who is better, Michael Jordan or LeBron James. Around the Horn would not nearly be the same show if they used these hot take influencers instead of actual sports journalists. That show would be a train wreck. The rise of hot takes also led to this next downfall. Politics ruins everything. Now, let me start with this. In today's media, politics are unavoidable. And I'm certainly not saying Around the Horn was canceled because of its politics or wokeism. It wasn't. But it's also true that politics has infiltrated the world of sports.
Trans kids deserve to play sports.
Sports used to be an escape from the real world for a lot of people. And now the real world is forcing its way into a space that you used to use to escape from it. Take the Colin Kaepernick kneeling situation. Around the Horn was in a difficult position because you can't just not talk about it. This political issue is now a sports issue. And now you have a topic that will turn off half of your audience depending on which way you go. Hell, you could lose 100% of your audience if you argue both sides, because everyone heard something that they morally disagree with. It's these deeper political issues that have driven fans away from most shows, and not just sports shows. People can disagree with you on the MJ-LeBron debate and move on, but it is harder to just move on when you tune into a sports show that's making a case against your values. And it doesn't matter if it's for standing against police brutality or respecting the flag. It's a no-win situation for Around the Horn. Grab your tinfoil hat because I have a theory on why the show was actually canceled. Now, I don't have any inside information or really any details on this situation, but this is what makes sense to me on a surface level. Tony Reali's contract is set to expire in August, and if Around the Horn gets extended for another season or two, ESPN would then have to re-sign Tony Reali to a new contract as well. Because you can't have Around the Horn without Tony. Fans would revolt, and the show and ESPN would ruin over 2 decades of goodwill. Now, Tony has been with ESPN for nearly 25 years. Signing a 25-year vet would not be cheap. Salaries don't usually go down year over year unless your role is drastically reduced. My thought is ESPN probably thought it would be easier to cancel the show than replace the longtime beloved host in Tony. And if the show is canceled, it is very easy to not give Tony a new contract. ESPN could now take all that money they saved and use it to create another original program. But what's more likely is they'll just license somebody else's show and play it on their network. Again, I'm just an outsider looking in, but on the surface, that checks out with me. So, is this the end of sports journalism as we know it? On TV? Probably. Around the Horn and PTI were the last remnants of a golden age of ESPN. And I don't know if you can just replace Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon when they retire. Kornheiser is 76 and Wilbon is 66. And when they're done, I think mainstream sports journalism is done.
Where does sports media go from here? I'm not sure what the future looks like. I just hope shows like PTI and Around the Horn have left a lasting influence on whatever comes next.
I mean, even this channel, my personal YouTube channel, draws inspiration from Around the Horn. I want to put out content that is well thought out, that is worth your time and attention, while also being entertaining, funny, and like Woody Page, unapologetically myself. As for Around the Horn, I think there could be a revival here on YouTube. It is a proven internet-friendly formula that is cheap to produce and could continue to give young sports journalists a platform to showcase their talents. But I'm not going to hold my breath. I don't see ESPN giving away their IP so somebody else can go make money with it. I would subscribe to a Tony Reali knockoff internet version of Around the Horn. Tony Reali is too talented to just be the host of a popular sports talk show. In that aspect, I'm kind of glad Around the Horn is over because I'm excited to see what his next endeavor is. So with that, I offer the best of luck to Tony Reali and everyone associated with Around the Horn for the last 20 some odd years. Around the Horn was fundamental in the way I consume sports as a sports-obsessed teenager in Vermont, 3,000 miles away from my favorite teams. I miss the days of getting home from school or practice, planning myself on the couch, and kicking off a 4-hour sports marathon with this.
It's Around the Horn.
Thanks for listening. And...
Playa!